Hey, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Meteorkaiser here, back again with another challenge run. And I know I've been slacking. It's been another like 2 or so months since I've uploaded, but yeah, I'm here at least. I made it. But anyway guys, we're going to be doing a game I haven't touched on this channel yet, surprisingly. I am taking care of Fire Emblem Fates, FE14, whatever you want to call it. We are doing a Birthright run where I'm only going to pick female characters. So that includes Corin as well, but I'm not allowed to actively use any male characters in the run at all. Now this is going to be a little bit different because I can kind of do it, and what I mean by that is I'm basically starting the run from chapter 7 onwards, because chapter 1 through 6 is very difficult to do with just female characters, because for example in the first chapter, if you're playing as female Corin, you'll have Jacob and Gunther, and beating it with just the female Corin is pretty difficult. So yeah, but it's not too complicated of rules. And also, I'm not allowed to go through many side quests. I'm allowing myself one paralog, and that's only to pick up Mozu. But everything else is off limits. No training off the side, and I'm not allowed to reclass my units either. Also, no extra items from Wi-Fi, because that just seems like too much. I'm allowed to pick up items from the fort itself, so I can use that, but I can't go through any of the quote-unquote like defense chapters, because that does not count as a main mission, and I'm only using the paralogs where I can pick up a unit. So basically the only seal I'm allowed to use are master seals, so I can only, and the only difference between the units I can do is for promotions, so I can pick whichever of the two options I get for promoting units. So for example, let's just say promote Hana. I can either promote her into a sword master or a master of arms. I have that option. I don't have to specifically choose one class. Also, I'm not allowed to use capturable units because I feel like that would be a little bit too cheap. And also, this is not an Iron Man, so I'm going to reset if a unit dies. So I will be cutting out a lot of that footage, but I'll mention a few times where the resetting is quote-unquote important to the chapters, but I will let you guys know that. So to talk about a little bit of the prologue stuff, because I'm not going to go in depth into each chapter for the prologue, I'm just going to give you guys a sort of rundown on who we get and who we're using. So the units I got that I can use in the prologue are the female Corin, who has a boon of speed and a bane of luck. I usually pick banes for luck because luck is a not inconsequential stat, but it's less effective than most other stats, and I do want her to have a nice hefty amount of speed. So at level 9 by the end of the prologue, she has 11 strength, 7 magic, 11 skill, 15 speed, 10 luck, 7 defense, and 3 resistance with Yato equipped. So there's going to be a little bit of discrepancy here between the stats that I'm explaining to you and sometimes what's actually like on the wiki or what you will get officially, because I'm not really counteracting for changes in stats based on weapons or skills. So I'm gonna either show what's on screen or what I found on the wiki. So it's going to be a little bit of discrepancy between stats here or there. So just so you guys know. Yeah, I think this is one of the first Fire Emblem games that really has your stats affected by what weapon you have. Like certain weapons will give you a lot of avoid, and certain other weapons will give you like extra strength minus speed, things like that. I guess the best example of the weapon stat thing would be like Corin from the Yato to the Dragonstone. Now Corin with the Yato does a lot more damage, but Corin with the Dragonstone is very defensive. So if I have situations where I need Corin to take damage and not deal out too much damage, I will equip that Dragonstone. And this is also the first Fire Emblem game that I can think of that has all of your weapons don't have any durability. So you can just use them infinitely. Which is, I never really had a problem with that in other Fire Emblem games, so that really doesn't make too much of a difference. But anyway, I digress. Just a few examples early on. So next I have Rinka, who has reached level 5 with 9 strength, 2 magic, 7 skill, 9 speed, 6 luck, 10 defense, and 3 resistance. So she isn't the strongest unit, but she's very good defensively, so she'll be a very useful tank in this run, especially early on. Later on she will fall off, however we're going to make sure that we're using her for her defensive capabilities early on as much as we can. Next up we have good old Azura, our dancer, so that's kind of said and done there. Next up is Sakura, a healer, so very similar thing where she can't deal damage, but she's very useful for healing, and later on in the run we'll be able to get her to that Onmyoji class to give her some DPS capabilities. And that's the only weapon class that actually has any durability in this game, which is staves. So that's to prevent like broken warp strats or other recover rescue sort of abuses, which really makes sense. So right now my offensive is just really Corin and defensive is Rinka. and I spend most of the prologue just leveling up Corrin, as you could tell by the levels. So anyway, that's enough of that kind of out of the way, and I'll finally be able to jump into Chapter 7, A Vow Upheld. So immediately off the bat, we get both Hana and Tsubaki. Tsubaki I'm not even going to touch because we're not allowed to use him. So he just stays in the back of the chapter while everyone else goes to clear through the chapter. Now Hana is a level 4 samurai with 9 strength, 0 magic, 11 skill, 12 speed, 5 luck, 5 defense, and 8 resistance. So she is an extremely fast unit with decent enough strength, and she has a solid 20 base avoid. So gonna definitely be a very good dodge tank kind of unit. Essentially, she's bad on enemy phase and great on player phase, pretty much the same thing as any Myrmidon from any other game. So this is kind of a difficult chapter where I need to use pair-up tactics while mainly holding the chokes with Rinka and rushing down the enemies in the open areas with Corrin and Hana. Azura and Sakura stay in the back for support and tactical dances, just so I can get that extra attack when I need it. I talk to the boss Silas and recruit him just so I don't have to fight him, and I don't really need him, but hey, I will take his free weapon and give that to someone else. So next up, I do that paralogue between just to pick up Mozu. I won't go in depth in the paralogue, but nothing difficult, just defeat some faces and pick up Mozu. Mozu is not a great unit by any stretch of the imagination. She starts out as a villager. I did not get her stats here, but all I know off the top of my head is she is just a very, very weak unit to start off with. She can be stronger if you put enough effort into her. And I kind of just picked her up just to have that extra unit, that extra buffer. I might not use her a lot, but at least I have that option available to me. So anyway, next up we have Chapter 8, Fierce Winds. So this one we got a whopping 3 new units off the bat. 4 total if you include Azuma. But as I said, we're not using him. So first is Orochi, which is are going to be our only proper mage for the run. We have like side mages later for promotions, but no other mages in this run besides from good old Orochi. So she has 1 strength, 13 magic, 12 skill, 8 speed, 6 luck, 6 defense, and 11 resistance. So very good early to have a nice resistance boost because we want to be able to protect ourselves from enemy mages. And she is a very, very good unit with nuking capability, just is a little bit slow, so if she's caught alone, she won't last long at all. Now talking exactly about that, we have Setsuna, who is an archer with the exact same issue, but she's strong with a bow and has poor movement and defenses. With 8 strength, 0 magic, 11 skill, 10 speed, 6 luck, 5 defense, and 10 resistance. So she's pretty much the exact same thing as Orochi, just a bow instead of a tome. So the biggest downside to her is obviously that 1 range capability that she does not have because she's only a 2 range unit. But at least she's only level 3, so she's definitely got some room to grow and has very good basis for being a level 3. It's just that retaliation, so she's going to need to be a very good, strong, powerful, friendly turn unit. Next up we have Hinooka, who is the opposite of these two, honestly. She's a Sky Knight with 9 strength, 4 magic, 13 skill, 16 speed, 12 luck, 14 defense, and a whopping 20 resistance with the Guard Naginata, a lance that gives its user extra 5 defense and resistance equipped. So she is a full tank through and through, especially a mage tank, which we're going to desperately need. But the biggest problem with her is archers. As expected from a Sky Knight, you have to avoid archers like the plague because she will probably get one shot, or if not, get taken really low. So you've got to be careful with her and start using those enemy ranges a lot. So this is a desert chapter with dragon veins that turn desert tiles to grass ones for easier movement. It's a really easy chapter as I'm taking advantage of the X button, which does check for those enemy ranges that I said earlier, and I'm constantly pussyfooting around, just making sure I'm not getting any units out of where they should be. So the boss Fuga is a promoted unit, which is the first one we have to fight against. He is a master of arms with a vulnerability to magic, and he only has 1 range, and also he does not move. So he's basically a very easy enemy for me to attack from a 2 range. So Orochi, Setsuna, any of those guys can take care of him real quick. And with that, we're able to move on to Chapter 9, Land of Gods. So Chapter 9 is the first chapter that gives me some difficulty in this run. I had to reset early a couple of times because I didn't really have a good strategy going into this. And the main reason for this is because the spawn area is completely surrounded by units on 3 sides, and I don't have enough tanks to cover my weaker units. So my plan for this was to, after I kind of screwed up a few times, I decided I was going to deal with the immediate units on both sides and then just head south to just try and clear out the south area before even touching the east and west again. And another main reason for doing this is because in a few turns we get Oboro at level 10. Now Oboro is a very good starting unit because she has 13 strength, 0 magic, 11 skill, 12 speed, 11 luck, 13 defense, and 8 resistance. Very, very good, solid kind of Rinka type unit where she's pretty good defensively, but she does actually have a little bit more offense than Rinka does. She is level 10, which is a little bit higher level than everyone else for starting units, but that's not going to be too much of a problem. So very good all-rounder, can be used in a lot of good situations. So the enemy reinforcements are pretty consistent from the stairs, so I'm not able to catch up to those outlaws that were trying to steal all of the treasure chests, unfortunately. Now I'm sure I could have gone for it if I just decided to book it, but also I am scared because of the outlaws. I can't chase after them with Hinooka because the outlaws will just one-shot her because they're archers, yay! But besides from that, the rest of the chapter isn't too bad, and the boss Zola is easily dealt with by Hinooka. It's kind of ironic because Zola's really strong, but Hinooka has so much resistance that a 20 attack Mjolnir does absolutely nothing to her. He does have a very high 29 crit, so I'm too scared to use any other unit, and Hinooka only does 3 damage, so it does take me forever, but I do deal with Zola eventually while grinding some levels on Hinooka. And with that said and done, we're moving on to Chapter 10, Ninja Village. This chapter sucks. So, there are traps everywhere that appear, and they do AoE dots to your units, so some damage over time for each turn that you're spent standing on those spikes. It can hurt the enemies as well, but the price to pay to have to deal with a bunch of spikes is not worth it. So this means that Sakura needs to work overtime just to keep the units up to full health, which is super annoying. The majority of the enemies are ninjas, which aren't the strongest units, but they have high move and speed. Avoid having your low speed units attack because they will probably get doubled. Tanks can't one round, so they will need to be supported by DPS units, which means it takes 2 units to kill a lot of these enemies, and so that limits my options, and I have to play a lot safer. Yay for pussyfooting! The enemies have archers and mages to support the ninjas, so my life is hell dealing with those, so I can't just willy-nilly use Hinooka and hope and pray that I can kill everything. Thankfully, after the first half of the chapter, the rest is actually just a cakewalk from the Shrine Maiden or so onwards, because only a few enemies are left. And the boss, Kotaro, does not move, so it gives time for Hana and Rinka to move into a solid position to double Kotaro and take him out without problems. And with that being said, we move on to Chapter 11, To the Sea. So this one we get 2 new units. Technically, we got Kagero at the end of the last chapter, but this is the first time we're using her, so I'm going to count this as this chapter. So, Kagero is my favorite Fire Emblem Fates character. I think my second favorite in the franchise, right after Lyn. Kagero is a level 10 ninja with 15 strength, 0 magic, 10 skill, 12 speed, 7 luck, 9 defense, and 10 resistance. Pretty similar to both Hana and Oboro in weird ways, where she is a very good all-round unit, but she has a little bit more focus on that strength, but the speed is less. So she's like almost like the reverse of Hana, but very, very much Oboro type, where she's got most of her stats are pretty decent. The only thing to make it better would be her skill and defense for starting out. But that 15 strength is very, very nice, and I'm going to be able to double a lot of enemies with pretty solid shurikens. Shurikens are a very good weapon class. The one downside about Kagero is that she is pretty frail and has a low amount of HP, so just, again, you want to be kind of careful. She's not really a dodge tank like Hana is. Her avoid isn't quite as good, so she's more of a Setsuna kind of nuking character, but a little bit better. Next up we have Reina, our first pre-promote unit, and that is a Kinshi Knight. Now, Kinshi Knight is a very interesting class where she's able to use both lances and bows, but she's weak to bows because she's a Pegasus Knight type unit. Kind of reminds me of like dragon types in Pokemon, where she's weak to her own weapon. She has 17 strength, 5 magic, 14 skill, a whopping 20 speed, 14 luck, 10 defense, and 13 resistance. Very, very solid pre-promote unit with great strength and speed. Her one downside is, of course, that bow weakness, and she does have low HP and defense for her level. So unlike Hinooka, I have to be a lot more careful with her. But she is absolutely perfect on this chapter with dealing with those wyvern reinforcements from south, while the rest of my army can clear the airship and the northern reinforcements. Kagero is also great in this chapter, showing us her excellent 1-2 range ability and her good damage. So the enemies are slowly starting to get stronger, and I'm constantly having to stay out of enemy range as much as I can. But at least with like kind of only being able to use 50% of my units are growing at a faster rate than I normally would be. Sure, I have less options for taking out enemies, but at least I have that versatility in levels. So there's a little mechanic on this map with a whirlwind So we activate a Dragon Vein, and it will basically limit the flyer mobility in the middle right side of the map. And this is great for the enemy reinforcements coming from the north. Those Wyvern Riders can kind of be avoided. However, don't put Hinooka or Reina in that area, because it'll also limit their mobility to like 1 or 2 per turn, which is awful for a flyer. So the boss is actually weird. The boss is just a Wyvern Lord, doesn't have a specific name or anything, but that boss does need to get baited out of the corner, so I do use Hinooka and Oboro for that. And once the boss has been lured out, he goes down super easily. It's a flyer. I can just throw an arrow at it and it dies. And anyway, we move on to chapter 12, Dark Reunion. So something I just realized about this chapter name, I don't know if anybody has ever watched, I don't know the name of it. I think it's The Disastrous Life of Saiki Kusuo, the anime. Dark Reunion is one of the evil organizations in that show, and it just made me think of that. So if any of you have watched that, there's a little... But even though it has a cool name, I despise this chapter. Absolutely hate this chapter. So this is that one chapter at the opera house with Azura's singing scene and Garen like weirdly getting more and more discomfort. Love that scene, but hate the chapter. And the reason this chapter is so hard is because just how tight the corners are. It's basically a collection of like mini boats that the units are interconnected between. And so there's just narrow pathways between the boats. So literally only like 1 or 2 of my units can attack at once, instead of being able to have that surround like I'm normally able to do with my units. So in order to semi-survive this chapter, I have to abuse pair-ups just to be able to live. And I realized this after several failed attempts. This was really bad for me. I think I failed like 5 times before I decided I was just going to abuse pair-ups, because none of my units could really deal with a certain issue later on, namely Xander. So you can skip this chapter by having Corrin pair up with a flyer and just heading straight for the exit, but I wanted to go through it normally, and also part of me forgot about this strategy, so it's kind of oops. But anyway, there's a lot of Armor Knight, so Orochi's going to be very, very useful in this chapter. However, it is super hard to defend her against any other enemies, because after she attacks, she's kind of vulnerable to that limited space. Garen's kind of stays in the middle south area, and he just does not move. So he will attack you if you get in his range though, so just be careful to not do that. And you won't have to deal with him this chapter if you do that. However, you're still going to have to deal with Xander, Laszlo, and Perry. Laszlo and Perry are not that big of a deal. They're simple units to take care of. But Xander is a big problem, and he's way too strong for this point. After several failed attempts, the only way I figured out how to deal with him is to have Rinka pair up with Corrin for that defense bonus, and have Corrin hold the Dragon Stone for more stats. So I live on super low HP, but I'm barely able to hold on, and by abusing that kind of strategy, I'm able to take him out eventually. I am able to clear out the rest of the enemies, and I freeze the lake, so I don't have to deal with Garen, and I just make my way across that lake towards the exit. And I clear out this godforsaken chapter and move on to chapter 13, Another Hope. Chapter 13 is that one chapter with that one Camilla scene. I think we all know which one I'm talking about. This one, thankfully, was a little bit easier than the last chapter, but it still gives me a couple of problems. So this chapter is super open, which is great, but it also kind of restricts me because I have to take care of a lot of houses. There's a lot of houses with goods, but outlaws, we'll get to them first if you take too long. So you can't, if you want all of the goods, you gotta rush a bit to get those houses. So the first attempt, I did mess up by spreading my army a bit too thin. So then I decided to centralize a bit more, and that did help me in the long run. So the hardest part about this chapter is definitely those mini bosses. There is a total of, I want to say, it's like 5 or 6. We have Hans, 2 generals, a Wyvern Lord, Baruka, and Selena on top of Camilla, the boss. But the way that chapter is kind of laid out, because we have Camilla as a Malignite, and she's the most mobile of them, so she was the first one who we had to deal with. And she was actually pretty easy as long as you can take 1 hit from her, because she's really strong herself. But she's a Malignite, so she's weak to bows, so she can go down in like a heartbeat. But this is also where Hinooka came into clutch, because she was able to tank 1 hit from her, and that let Reina and Corrin deal with Camilla on that next turn. So what sucked for me was really trying to take care of Hans, the Wyvern Lord, a general, and Baruka all on the same turn. So first up, I dealt with the Wyvern Lord with Setsuna, which was really easy because the Wyvern Lord didn't pose much of a threat to an archer. Hans went down to Kagero and finished by Rinka. So Kagero did that beginning blow, and then Rinka kind of finished off that job. Veruca was super easy with Core and 2 rounding her, and all that was left was just one general and then Selena, so pretty easy finish there. And at the end of the chapter we do got our last character, which is weird that we're getting our last character already and it's only chapter 13. And that character is Scarlet. So she starts off as a Wyvern Lord, so already promoted, with 25 strength, 4 magic, 17 skill, 19 speed, 14 luck, 22 defense, and 6 resistance. Super insanely strong unit with a terrible weakness to magic. So as long as you avoid bows and tomes, Scarlet is basically unstoppable. But the problem with that is bows and tomes seem to be 2 of the most common enemy unit types, being those outlaws and then those mages. But anyway, as long as you're not stupid, you should be fine. Just play out of ranges, nothing unusual there. But anyway, next we move on to chapter 14, Light Scatters. So this chapter is split up into 2 different sections. First we have an open area, and then we have the inside portion of the map. So the open area isn't that bad, but there are paladins both on the left and the right, and they are very strong units. It took me a couple of attempts to figure out where to put my units, and I kind of decided on having literally everyone go to the left except for Scarlet, and they would kind of group up and deal with the paladin and then those cavaliers on the left side, and then Scarlet just solos everything on the right side, because when it comes to physical attacking enemies, she destroys them instantly. So when we've dealt with those paladins and then the few outlaws that are in that area, we move up to the gate area, which the gate area is guarded by Charlotte and Benny. At least the good thing with them is they don't move. However, they are paired. So Charlotte will move when Benny dies. However, by that time you should be able to take care of Charlotte by herself. But the main problem is that they are paired, so Benny will get that extra defense and strength from Charlotte, but they are not that difficult. The worst part about this area is the outlaws in the sort of opening area of that castle, and that means that I can't use my strongest units to bait the enemies out. So I have to kind of pick and choose other units in my army that can bait, and so that's really, I only have 2 options, which would be Rinka and Korin. So I do end up using Rinka, and that works just fine, thank God. And so the rest of the chapter is just cleaning up enemies. There are a few scary instances where I got low on Scarlet once because I overestimated her capabilities, and there's more and more promoted enemies now. Basically half of the enemies in the area are promoted, so generals, berserkers, heroes, those types of enemy. But thankfully, there's one really good thing about this area is there is a dragon vein. So all of the enemies, including the boss Daniela, are a joke with the dragon veins, which drop rocks to reduce enemy HP by 10 HP points per vein, and there's 3 veins total. So if you hit all 3, you're going to reduce pretty much all of the enemies to 1 HP. Now that's if you can get to them before, so there's some instances where you won't be able to get through all of the veins immediately, but only for the boss. So most of the enemies are pretty easy, but that boss goes down in 1 hit to Korin. And also before the end of the chapter, I do end up promoting my first unit. I promote Sakura, who I've kind of grinded up healing, into an Omyoji at the end of the chapter. And I decided to go with the Omyoji because I do want that offensive capability to assist with that damage, and we only have that one mage being a Rochi, so this will be kind of a nice little buffer if we have any enemies that are weak to resistance. Also, I am pretty much for all of my units, I am promoting them at level 20 because I don't have the opportunity to use second class, or I don't have the opportunity to reclass my units. I am trying to get them to as high of a level as possible, and I know there's some discrepancy within the community about when's the best time to promote. Normally I do agree 10 to 15 is definitely 15 is that range if you want to get that skill. However, to 20 is kind of pointless. However, the reason I'm doing it is because I do only have limited level up front. But anyway, with that, we move on to chapter 15, Wolfskin Peak. So at the beginning of this chapter, I promote Korin into a Hoshido Noble, which gives her the ability to heal, which will really help a lot in the long run, because that means I have an extra healer. So now I have a total of 2 healers, and it's going to be more in the future, thank God. This means I'm not so reliant on just Sakura for all my healing, because I don't want to have a repeat of that ninja chapter. So this chapter has just Wolfskin tribe members, hence the name Wolfskin Peak, and they have very good mobility when it comes to forest and mountain tiles, which is pretty much what the entirety of this chapter is made of. So that's the biggest problem about this chapter, is that lack of mobility that we have versus what they have. The Wolfskins themselves are a complete joke, but the promoted version, I'm gonna butcher this name, the Wolfsegners. It's probably not that, but we're going to go with Wolfsegners. So they are pretty strong with a solid 20 strength. So if possible, it's a good idea to let them come to you, but don't let them attack you on enemy phase. So bring your units as close as you can, or bait them out with your stronger defense units like Rinka, you know, your you know, your Rinka, your Hinooka, and your Oboros, you know? So, talking about Rinka, actually, in this chapter, I decided to promote both Rinka and Kagero after leveling them both to 20. So, I promote Rinka into an Oni Chieftain, so she keeps her strong defense advantage at the cost of her strength, because I do definitely want her as a defensive unit, because I much rather have defense over offense, because most of the times I can try and scrounge together extra damage, but it's harder to keep my units alive. But on the reverse of that, I promote Kagero into a Ninja Master to basically just keep doing the same thing that she was doing before, which is just murder. Yeah, she's really good at that. So the hardest part of this chapter was that terrain. So basically the best units I have for this chapter are going to be my flyers. I did have to reset once due to overestimating Reyna. I put her in front of a couple of those promoted wolfskin guys, who I'm not going to say the name of, but that really wasn't that big of a deal. And also that boss, Keaton, who will join if you're in the other, you know, because we get Caden or whatever his name is, that one guy, and then the others get Keaton. But we have to fight Keaton in this version. He's a joke. He's got 33 attack, which is really, really good with his Beast Stone Plus. But Rinka just ends up baiting him out, tanks a hit, and then Kagero finishes them off. Super simple. And that's going to do it for this part. I'm going to be doing the rest of this, hopefully soon-ish, hopefully before next month. But if I do not get to that, I will just let you guys know that on the 20th and maybe 21st, we'll see. I will definitely be playing as much Fire Emblem Engage as humanly possible. It'll probably be live streamed. I'll just be doing a normal playthrough because I just want to experience the game. But I'm super excited for it, enough for me to take a day or two off of work. So I'm definitely going to make sure I get you guys that stream. So I hope you guys look forward to that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. My name has been Meteor Kaiser, and I will see you in the next part. But until then, as always, peace.